If two people are truly meant for each other, there is one pattern that almost always shows up. It doesn't look like the fairy tale most of us were raised on, the version where two strangers lock eyes, everything clicks into place, and life becomes easy from that point forward. Real destiny rarely behaves that way. More often, it begins with disruption. It begins with confusion, discomfort, and a kind of upheaval that feels, in the moment, almost impossible to make sense of. The universe doesn't usually hand people a finished love story. It tests them first. It uses that testing to strip away false ideas about what love is supposed to feel like, to reshape who they are underneath all their old defenses, and to demand a certain amount of growth before it allows anything lasting to take root. That refining process, uncomfortable as it is, turns out to be the thread running through almost every story of two people who were genuinely meant to end up together. Destined love almost never starts with comfort. It starts with recognition. A recognition that unsettles you more than it soothes you. The first sign that someone matters isn't a wave of calm. It's something quieter and stranger, a kind of resonance in your chest that responds to a person before your mind has caught up enough to explain why. It can feel like being seen all the way through, which is exactly why it's disorienting. Destiny doesn't politely knock. It tends to walk straight into the parts of your life that were already unsteady. So when you meet someone who ends up mattering enormously, the beginning is rarely peaceful. You might feel unmoored instead of certain. That unease isn't a warning sign that the person is wrong for you. It's often the opposite. They function like a mirror, showing you pieces of yourself you've spent years avoiding, the fears you don't talk about, the insecurities you've learned to hide, the habits that have quietly sabotaged connection after connection. Most people equate love with steadiness and predictability. But when destiny is genuinely at work, it frequently shows up first as weather. A storm that unsettles you just enough to remind you that growth has to come before any real, lasting bond can form. One of the strangest features of these connections is how rarely they manage to stay intact the first time around. Life seems to engineer distance between people who are, on paper, perfect for each other. And it's not cruelty, it's necessity. That separation isn't random, it's doing something. Usually, one or both people are still carrying unresolved wounds, patterns they haven't examined, or pain they haven't processed. Maybe one person is terrified of being emotionally exposed. Maybe the other is still fighting a quiet war with their own self-worth. Sometimes what looks like love in these early stages is actually being offered out of fear or scarcity, rather than out of genuine wholeness. And even two people with good intentions can hurt each other badly while they're both still working through unfinished business. In those moments, it's as if life itself is saying, not yet. Not because it doesn't want you together, but because it's giving both of you time. Time to build self-awareness, time to mature emotionally, time to become people who can actually hold what you're asking for. Destined love tends to be patient in exactly this way. It insists on honesty. It doesn't offer shortcuts. Every hard moment, every heartbreak, every stretch of uncertainty is quietly doing preparation work. The distance exists to show you what you actually need for your own development, and to teach you how to love without grasping, without needing someone to complete you. When the timing is finally right, things tend to come together with very little forcing, but only because both people have been reshaped enough to receive it and sustain it. That's the part most people miss. Destiny isn't a lucky break. It's closer to a slow, exacting kind of craftsmanship, sanding down the rough edges before it hands over anything permanent. It isn't about instant gratification. It's a long unfolding, recognition, disruption, distance, and then eventually clarity. So if you feel unsettled by someone, or if life keeps pulling you apart from them, try not to panic. That discomfort might just be a sign that something real is being built underneath the surface. A love you'll actually be ready for once it arrives. Not a love that simply calms your existing wounds, but one that changes you enough to meet it. When two people are genuinely aligned, they tend to find their way back to each other eventually. not as the same people who first met, but as versions of themselves that have actually grown into the connection. Getting that love too soon, before either person has done the necessary work, risks damaging the very thing it was supposed to protect. Separation, in that sense, isn't a mistake. It's part of the design. When people who are meant for each other are pulled apart, the pain doesn't behave like ordinary heartbreak. It's not simple sadness or missing someone's company. It's closer to an ache that sits underneath everything, like something essential has gone quiet inside you. That's because these connections were never really about comfort or ego in the first place. They're tied to growth, to becoming whole, to confronting the exact parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. Even a temporary loss can force you to look at your fear of abandonment, your need for approval, the ways you've given too much of yourself away just to keep someone close, or the ways you've avoided setting boundaries because you were afraid of losing the connection altogether. None of that is punishment. It's an unusually direct kind of wake-up call, one that pushes you toward radical honesty with yourself and forces you to look at the habits that have kept you from real intimacy. Destined love, in its rawest form, isn't gentle. It's transformative, and those aren't always the same thing. Here's the part that tends to surprise people the most, even during long silences, even without any contact, even when logic says you should have moved on. Something in you keeps quietly shifting. The growth happens beneath the surface, almost without your noticing. You get sharper about what you actually want. You get more honest with yourself. Old patterns you used to tolerate start to feel wrong. People you once chased start to lose their pull. Your attention drifts away from surface-level validation and toward things with real depth and honesty. You may never consciously connect this shift to the person who set it off, but it started the moment they entered your life. These connections don't feed obsession, they feed self-examination. You might notice them cross your mind at strange times, not out of loneliness, but because some part of you recognizes there's an unfinished lesson tied to them, something only that specific relationship could unlock. You think of them during moments of insight, during emotional breakthroughs, during the quiet hours when everything else has gone still. That's not fixation, that's integration, their influence quietly becoming part of how you understand yourself. And here's the strange part, nothing else quite fills that space. People try. They date other people, throw themselves into distractions, convince themselves they've moved on, and often a subtle sense of incompleteness lingers anyway. Not because the new person isn't valuable, but because they simply don't activate the same growth. Destined connections operate on a different register entirely. They're not about ease or attraction, they're about evolution, pushing both people toward a fuller version of themselves, teaching lessons that ordinary relationships rarely reach. You can't force that kind of connection, and you can't replicate it with someone else, because its purpose was never simple companionship. It exists to challenge you, to teach you something, and to change both people involved. During separation, that work keeps happening quietly on both sides. One person might be learning to set boundaries for the first time. The other might be learning to take responsibility instead of deflecting. One might be building self-respect from scratch. The other might be building the resilience to sit with hard truths instead of running from them. One learns to stop chasing what can't be controlled. The other learns to stop dodging what needs to be faced. Neither person can see the whole picture yet, and that's intentional. Growth needs room to happen without a finish line in constant view. This process is deliberate, and it exists to make sure that when these two paths cross again, the connection that forms isn't fragile. It's built to last because it's built on two people who've actually done the work. Before two people who are meant for each other can really come back together, certain illusions have to fall away first. Beliefs like, love should always be easy, or if someone truly cares, they'd never leave, or I have to earn love, or I need someone else to feel whole. These are the very foundations of shaky, anxious relationships, and they tend to get dismantled slowly, often painfully, before anything solid can be built. Every difficult moment along the way is doing something. Real love was never meant to be built on fear or dependency. It's built on self-awareness, intentional choice, and ongoing growth. Destined love was never about needing someone to survive. It's about choosing them freely from a place where you're already whole. That inner shift tends to happen quietly, almost like dawn breaking after a long night. At some point, you notice you don't need the person for your emotional stability anymore. You stop chasing love out of fear or scarcity. And that, oddly enough, tends to be exactly when momentum shifts again in their direction. When both people can stand on their own, love stops being a survival strategy and becomes a decision. Calm, intentional, almost magnetic, and it tends to draw the right people together at the right moment. When people who are genuinely meant to reconnect finally do, the experience feels noticeably different than the first time around. There's less tension, less fear, less ego running the show. The connection feels calmer, deeper, more self-aware. It won't be flawless, no relationship is, but it will feel intentional in a way the earlier version never did. The confusion and games that defined the beginning tend to disappear, replaced by a stronger, steadier sense of recognition. And here's something worth sitting with. Even in cases where two people don't end up reuniting, the connection still mattered. Not every meaningful relationship is meant to be permanent. Some exist purely to break an old pattern, to wake up a dormant sense of self-worth, to build resilience, or to redirect your life onto a more honest path. Their value isn't measured by whether they lasted, it's measured by how much they changed you. Destiny often feels rough before it feels kind, precisely because it prioritizes growth over comfort. It would rather cause temporary heartbreak than let you lose yourself completely in an unhealthy attachment. The lessons can feel brutal while you're inside them, but clarity tends to arrive with time. If there's one constant, it's this. When two people are genuinely meant to share something deep, they're often required to grow apart first. Illusions about love get stripped away. Old wounds get confronted instead of avoided. Hearts get reshaped into something steadier. Only after that does life allow for either a real reunion or a clean redirection. And either way, neither person walks away unchanged. If someone specific comes to mind while you're hearing this, let that sit with you for a second. If a connection is meant to come back, it tends to do so calmly, not through anxiety, urgency, or chaos. And if it's genuinely right for you, it will never ask you to abandon who you are to keep it. It will only ever ask you to grow. If it doesn't come back, that outcome still has value. It's still pointing you toward the person you're becoming. Every hard stretch, every confusing chapter, every painful lesson is doing something. Nothing gets wasted. It's all preparation for a love that eventually arrives or for a different, better aligned direction. And either way, you end up more ready for it than you were before. These kinds of connections are some of the more mysterious parts of being human, and they rarely follow the script we expect. When two people are genuinely aligned, life doesn't rush them into comfort or certainty. It tests them. It puts distance between them. It surfaces exactly the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. That distance isn't punishment. It's structural. It forces each person to face their fears, their insecurities, their unresolved history, and in doing so, it builds something most relationships never get around to building. Real emotional accountability, real self-respect, and the capacity to love without leaning on someone else to hold you together. Even in total silence, even with zero contact, that internal work keeps happening. You become more discerning, more honest with yourself. The lessons from that period were never really about the other person. They were about you and who you were becoming underneath all of it. Destined love was never meant to be easy. It's meant to be formative, shaping two people who are actually capable of holding a real, conscious, lasting connection. When reunion does happen, it tends to feel noticeably calmer and clearer than before. Less chaos, less ego, more intention. And if reunion never happens, the impact of the connection doesn't disappear. It keeps shaping how you see yourself and what you expect from love long after the relationship itself has ended. Every hard chapter still counts. Nothing about it was wasted. It was preparation for the version of love you're actually equipped to receive. That kind of love can't be rushed, forced, or manufactured through sheer effort. It tends to arrive quietly, often in ways that feel uncomfortable at first, because its purpose was never instant satisfaction. It was deeper transformation. The people who end up shaping your life the most will usually challenge you, disrupt your habits, and surface parts of yourself you tucked away even from your own awareness. You might not feel ready when they show up, and life might create distance anyway, distance that feels almost unbearable in the moment. But that space tends to teach patience, build independence, and demand a kind of honesty most people avoid. You start noticing how much you've historically searched for validation outside yourself, and slowly you start building that sense of wholeness from within instead. Every restless night, every unanswered question, every moment of reflection is quietly shaping someone capable of receiving love in its clearest, most honest form. These connections were never about fixation. They're about awareness, pulling your attention toward your values, your boundaries, your capacity for real vulnerability. You start wanting depth instead of distraction, meaning instead of momentary attention. And even if the person never comes back into your life, the change they triggered in you tends to stick around, quietly shaping how you show up in every relationship that follows. In that sense, this kind of destiny is both demanding and eventually generous. It strips away comfort to hand you clarity. It removes illusion to hand you truth. It challenges the core of who you are so that eventually you become whole enough to actually hold what you were looking for in the first place. When reunion does happen under those conditions, it tends to feel steady rather than frantic. No chasing, no games, no lingering doubt. Just a calm, deliberate kind of love, built on real growth and mutual respect, with the anxiety of the earlier version replaced by something closer to understanding. And if reunion never comes, that path still fulfills its purpose. Some connections exist purely to interrupt an old pattern, to wake up self-respect, or to teach a lesson in emotional depth that nothing else could have taught. Their meaning was never tied to how long they lasted. It's tied to how clearly they pointed you toward who you were meant to become. That influence tends to stay woven into your decisions and your character long after the relationship itself has ended. Destined love was never about needing someone or completing yourself through them. At its core, it's a conscious choice made from a place of fullness, not scarcity. It teaches you to stop avoiding discomfort and stop chasing approval. It demands real self-reflection and real courage, pushing you to face the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. The pain involved isn't punishment, it's a catalyst, and through it, you learn what real love actually requires: patience, awareness, and a willingness to keep growing, even when the path feels lonely or unclear. Every hard lesson along the way is one more step toward alignment, not for the sake of comfort, but for the kind of love that lasts because it was built on clarity and real, ongoing growth. These kinds of connections operate on a level most people never fully register. They're not about convenience or instant happiness. Their real function is to wake up parts of yourself that have stayed dormant for too long. When you meet someone who's genuinely meant to matter, it can feel like a mirror is being held up, reflecting back everything you've ignored or denied about yourself. That can feel deeply uncomfortable, because it forces you to face truths you've spent years avoiding, old patterns, hidden fears, and the quiet ways you've limited your own capacity to love freely. The pain of losing that connection, even briefly, cuts differently than ordinary heartbreak, not because the other person was wrong for you, but because they acted as a catalyst for exactly the growth you needed. They reveal where healing is overdue, where boundaries need to be set, and where self-respect needs to be reclaimed. Every bit of longing becomes a lesson, slowly shaping you into someone more capable of real connection. During that distance, you build patience, resilience, and self-awareness you didn't have before. You start observing your own needs without projecting them onto someone else. Things you used to tolerate start to feel misaligned with who you're becoming. People you used to chase stop holding your attention, and hollow validation loses its appeal. You start valuing honesty and presence over anything superficial. Even if you never consciously trace that shift back to the person who triggered it, the change keeps working quietly underneath everything. This is exactly why these reunions, when they happen, aren't rushed. The connection can't fully continue until both people are ready to show up completely, without fear running the show. Life is precise about this. First, it strips away illusion, dismantling beliefs like love should never hurt, or affection has to be earned, or I need someone else to feel complete. Facing those beliefs is uncomfortable, but it's necessary, because a real connection can only form once both people are choosing each other from wholeness instead of need. When that balance is finally in place, paths can converge again. This time shaped by clarity, maturity, and a shared commitment to keep growing. And if they never converge again, the purpose still holds. Every lesson, every loss, every reflective moment still moves you closer to becoming who you're meant to be. This kind of love reshapes how you approach every relationship going forward, how you carry yourself, how you see your own worth, how honest you're willing to be. It teaches emotional responsibility and courage, and it slowly dissolves the need for external validation, making room for something more intentional to grow in its place. When reunion happens, it tends to arrive with calm and honesty. When it doesn't, the connection still serves as a compass, pointing you toward continued growth and a life that actually reflects who you are. Every confusing chapter, every tear, every stretch of longing was doing something. Nothing here gets wasted. It might feel harsh before it feels kind, but the outcome tends to be lasting and real. These kinds of connections are never about convenience or ease. They reach into the core of who you are and push you toward genuine self-actualization. From the moment they enter your life, they act as a catalyst, forcing you to face parts of yourself you've avoided for years. That process is rarely comfortable. Life tends to create distance not as punishment, but as preparation. What you feel in that absence isn't just missing a person. It's the sense that something inside you is still unfinished. That's why the pain doesn't feel like ordinary heartbreak. It reaches into your sense of stability and demands a level of self-examination most relationships never ask for. During that separation, something in you keeps shifting, your understanding of love, of attachment, of your own limits. Things you once accepted without question start to feel wrong. You stop chasing people who can't meet you where you've grown to. You start valuing honesty and depth over approval. Quiet moments alone become opportunities to actually absorb what the experience is teaching you. That growth might not be visible from the outside, but it's real, and it's shaping you into someone capable of reconnecting, if that's what happens, with clarity and a far steadier sense of self. Destined love was never sustained by dependence. It's sustained by conscious choice. A real, lasting connection forms once both people are whole on their own, when love shifts from something you need to something you choose. As the ego loosens its grip, old beliefs like love has to be earned or I need someone else to be whole tend to fall away, because they distort what real connection actually looks like. Those lessons aren't easy, and they're not always painless, but they build emotional strength, self-respect, and the ability to love without fear or unhealthy attachment, which is exactly why this kind of love can feel demanding before it feels supportive. It prioritizes long-term growth over short-term comfort, breaking old patterns before it allows for anything new to take their place. When that connection does eventually return, it tends to be unmistakable, steady, balanced, and intentional, without the manipulation or anxious pursuit that might have defined its beginning. Both people have changed enough to give and receive love in a way that's actually healthy and reciprocal. And if it never returns, its purpose still holds. It woke something up in you, broke an old pattern, and pointed your life towards something more honest. Every difficult moment along the way was serving that purpose, quietly guiding you toward more wholeness and preparing you for whatever kind of love or lesson was always meant to find you.